working. What's up, guys and girls? I'm just trying to figure out if this is working or not. Let's check the old stream. Okay, sweet. Looks like I'm good. Hi, everybody. How you guys doing? What's up, ZBrush Live? Looks like I do have chat, so if you guys, anybody give me a shout, let me know you guys are out there. It's been a long time since I've streamed. It's been months. Well, outside of, if anybody that tunes into this, from Comic-Con, I'm actually going to be working on some stuff that I was trying to wrap up at Comic-Con that I just couldn't find the time to do, which is this Star-Lord piece that I started a little while back and just never got around to wrapping this guy up. So I got a couple hours, and I'm looking at, there's a few things that I wanted to finish up in this guy. In 2 hours, what can I actually get done? Where did I leave off? How much does ZBrush cost? You can actually, let's see if we can pull this up for you. So we have a few different price points. So we've got subscription, perpetual licenses, all that good stuff. So I'll pull up the page for you. So $39.95 for the single user monthly subscription. The perpetual, if you're really going to get into ZBrush and you're looking at going all in, the perpetual is good. As of now, we offer free upgrades, so once you purchase, you get the free upgrade. But if you're just looking to try it out, we've got the monthly subscription and all that stuff. So this is just the store.pixologic.com, and you can just click on the 2019 tab for all your ZBrush needs. Vichar, how are you? Oh, thanks for tuning in. It's too bad I can't see you. It's been a whole year almost. The summit's coming up. I hope you're doing great. Okay, so I left off with Star-Lord, right? I'm definitely going to, we have the Ultimaker 3 in the office for at least another month or two. From the good people at Ultimaker, they're letting us hang out to that for some, just goof around, doing some test prints and experimenting. So I want to print this guy, so that's the goal. And I kind of cheaped out on some of the, like I went in and I just did this very manual, working on the helmet, basically just sculpting the stuff in Dynamesh is where I kind of began. And I think I want to spend a little bit of time cleaning that up. The pose, I don't know, you guys tell me if it's looking bad or good, but I got to work on, all this needs to get tightened up. I need to work on his hands a lot. That elbow just looks broken. There's a lot of stuff I probably want to fix with all that, but I think before I get to that, I'm planning on probably just working on some hard surface stuff and then getting into some modeling with live Booleans and finishing up this blaster. I sort of have the temp blasters set up in here. You know, he's got these sort of dummy guns that definitely do look like prop guns. Kamar, you were saying you're planning to learn character animation, motion graphics. Oh, that's great. Well, if you're just getting into ZBrush, I mean, you come to ZBrush Live is a really good thing. We have obviously a lot of streamers and a lot of different artists that work in different styles, and you get a good scope of what everybody's doing in ZBrush, and really just a lot of education just to kind of see how people use ZBrush and how it works. And we also have a ton of free training, so you can go to zclassroom.com, and there's a lot of educational tutorials set up there. Character animation and ZBrush are different. So where ZBrush comes into the animation pipeline really is just the creation of the asset itself. So if you're working in games or film, for example, what majority of studios will do is ZBrush fits into the designing of the character. So a lot of times, which is the case for me and almost all of my characters, because I end up just, because I work a lot in education, I teach a lot of just T-pose, A-pose, setting stuff up for production. But you just kind of pose a character, like if you can see it, like arms out, right? And then it goes to an animator that uses other programs. So ZBrush is not an animating program. It's really just about creating the thing. So the asset creation portion is where we spend the most of our time in development and making tools for those things. So a lot of sculpting, a lot of modeling, those aspects of it. But it's very standardized in all of those traditional pipelines. So if you're getting into character animation, motion graphics, if you're dealing with low poly 3-dimensional objects, you can use ZBrush to create all kinds of things. We've seen people that, we've had companies from like people that go on tour with like rock bands that put up like projections on top of a screen, where they'll do like 3D modeling, rendering, animation, that kind of stuff, just using ZBrush to get crazy models and assets and kick those over to programs like Cinema 4D are very popular for that. Separate special paid courses for ZBrush tutorials. We don't put in, from the Pixologic side, no, we don't offer that. We don't offer anything but free content. So we provide free content for you guys. If you want to learn and get a paid education, there's a lot of institutions, schools like Noman have online training. There's plenty of stuff on Gumroad. You can actually check out, if you go to our, let's go to pixologic.com. And learn ZBrush third-party training. There's a pretty good list of just other places that you can go, direct links to even just like tutorial series that you can purchase DVDs that'll give you like a full, you want to create a character for game design and go through the entire modeling process. This is something you could purchase. We have a lot of really amazing artists that work in all these industries, whether it be games or film or toys, collectibles, prototyping, that kind of stuff, or even concept design. So like 3D character design, this is a really good series on just designing a character with Josh Herman, who's works for Marvel and other companies. But just how to go about making something like this. There's a lot of great stuff here on this page. This should get you started. Yeah, I'm very happy to share. It's truly my pleasure. And I'm gonna, now that I'm showing all this great artwork, I'm gonna go back to my crappy piece and see what I can do to make this thing look good. So the helmet, I think that's where I left off. And I did one of those things where I wanted to kind of just break away from my sort of production thing and do T-pose, A-pose, and I just went straight to posing and trying to sculpt asymmetrically to start getting stuff going. But now that the helmet's kind of off its sort of symmetry axis, it's going to be a little difficult, even if I want to go in with like posable symmetry, which I didn't set up, to continue modeling. So what I'll probably do is, just to work on the helmet, I got a separate version that I kind of have gone back to that I'm starting to tidy up here. So if, like this guy, just to give you guys a preface of where I was at, started off with just basic Dynamesh extractions just to get the sort of messy shell. And I think I was going through to just trying to figure out how to clean this up. If there's anything you'll get out of this stream, I'm just going to kind of troubleshoot and go through a bunch of random stuff in ZBrush today and see what we can come up with. So if you guys have questions at all, I love to go through stuff, so definitely give me a shout. So like I ended up Dynameshing, which I got up these kind of wonky surfaces, which is like, a lot of like age polish. Make sure my spotlight is off. Age polish to kind of go through and like flatten out these surfaces, but it's not, very perfect, right? It takes a lot more precision to get that stuff to look really clean. And I got some meshy brush strokes and all of that. And I did end up Z-remeshing, so I got some low subdivs, which gave me a pretty good piece. But I'm trying to figure out how to clean this up. Something I like to do for this stuff is take advantage of that. You guys, if you ever watch my streams, I use this on a regular basis, the Polish by Features, which looks at the polygroups of the surface. So we can basically make just simple polygroups at where we want edge transitions to be. So I kind of just went in, holding Control key and just painting, like going in and kind of roughing out. I'm hearing my own voice. So I was kind of like, going in with the masking brush and kind of just isolating out the area. Once I get that mask in there, I'll just do this real quick so you can kind of see, because it takes a lot of time when I want to make you guys watch me paint masks. It's very entertaining. So grabbing something like this, and we can do in the poly groups, you can do group by masked, or you could do the little ZBrush. Pro tip is Control W will make that a poly group. So I basically went through and I just did large transitions. So I grabbed this area here, did Control W, made that a group. And then a little trick is I wanted to get, like I want these, let's see if we can pull up the Star-Lord mask here. This is kind of getting into the nitty-gritty details. What am I looking at here? Even just like this front piece, or let's just take a look at like this guy. Alright, so we got like sharp edges here. There's a little bit of a sort of thickness or border transition where you have a sharp edge and a sharp edge. And even for this piece where we've got sort of just some kind of a sharp edge transition. So exterior surface, then an extrusion where you've got two sharp edges across. So maybe a good example would be like that ear piece, which was kind of soft and messy, right? And going in with like a smooth brush, holding the shift key, I could smooth it out and use the move brush to kind of like start pushing that shape around. But working this way, you get lumpy sculpts. It's not as clean as, say, like topology modeling or extruding. But I don't really want to go in and retopple this whole thing. It's really easy to kind of just sculpt something like this and rough it out. So I got a mask. Getting a mask from these guys, I was thinking, once I have this, I can actually just take this little section here. So I can Control Shift click on that poly group and do the visibility, the grow option. So using grow to kind of grow until it meets that edge. So I'm doing the hotkey Control Shift X until it roughly about meets that area. So I already have a poly group here, but the process is basically grabbing this, growing it, and then I can just hide this one and then do Control W to give this its own group. So that basically gives me a poly group here and then another poly group with edges. So then if you haven't used this one, that polish by features, if we just click and drag that slider, where two poly group borders meet, it's going to make a little sharp edge. So I kind of went through and did that for all these major extrusions here. And if you leave this little option closed, it basically what it tries, it limits ZBrush from polishing at a stronger tolerance, but the benefit is that it doesn't shrink the mesh in any way, so it's not shrinking the surface as a whole. But if you open this thing up and then you run this, it's going to work a lot more quickly and do a much stronger polish and kind of sharpen up those edges, but it will sort of shrink the overall silhouette. In order for it to do that, it has to make big changes to the surface itself. But you can see going from, if I undo, right, you just assign those poly groups, give myself a nice border. I got a little creative and gave a little poly group border here. So when I run that polish at 100, it's going to go through and just sharpen those guys up. So it kind of takes a lumpy sculpt and just kind of cleans it all up, which I find to be a nice way to kind of take a really quick and messy sculpt and turn it into something that's actually a bit more usable. So it's kind of where I've been, sort of getting to here. And then the rest of it is like, okay, I've got a lot of different parts and pieces, and I'm trying to figure out what things I want to sculpt and what things I want to model. If you guys are used to modeling in the traditional sense, like some of these components are obviously a lot better with extrusions and edge loops and clean topology, basically. Not something you really want to go in and sculpt unless you're, just a total pro and a total badass. But in this case, that's just something I'm not going to be very good at. Getting into things like nice sort of subtle transition lines here, this is stuff I see as something I could sculpt. Potentially a little extrusion like that, but that I kind of see as sort of a metal plate that'd be a lot easier to build topology and do extrusions. Maybe for some of these side parts I might be able to do that as well. So kind of figuring out what's going to be the easiest. Same thing for these sort of components. This could be something I could definitely sculpt, and maybe I'll get into doing some Boolean stuff. Dougie Fresh is in. He says he have to show you something amazing. Oh, you're really putting the pressure on me after all this time. Thanks for tuning in again. And William, I'm glad you found that useful. That's exciting. I really love to show that feature just because it's super handy in so many situations. So I'm glad you found that useful. And hopefully I'm not crapping out myself with the spotlight images here. So maybe I'll sort of tuck this guy over here just so I give myself a little screen real estate. Kamar, you're asking, we need to buy some other components like light pen or something like that for beginners. Well, when it comes to ZBrush, I would recommend that you have a form of tablet. It's kind of essential to be able to have a pen. Because it's sculpture, doing things with the mouse absolutely can be done. As a beginner, kind of going through the interface and kind of just figuring out navigation, I would say maybe do that first, just to kind of get through the basics of just how ZBrush works and where the buttons are, and then decide if you really want to go in. You know, you could do we do have an older version of ZBrush that is a free 45-day trial that can get you started. This version that I'm working in now, the newest version, we don't have a trial currently for this, but if you do the subscription for a month, you can get started, which I would say just kind of going through basic navigation, a mouse is fine. But when you really want to go in and start doing stuff, it's kind of essential to have a tablet, which we have good relationships with a lot of companies. Wacom is one that we use. I'm on a Wacom Cintiq. So this is a Wacom Intuos tablet is also a good device that a lot of people use. I prefer the Cintiq myself. I like to put pen to screen, same way that I draw. So really, you know, I got started on an Intuos, and a lot of people seem to do so. It's a lot more affordable than a Cintiq, which gets into, you know, thousands of dollars, unless you want to buy used, which you can. I believe they offer, there's like refurbished versions, I believe, or you could go on eBay and things like that. Okay, so that was the polish by features. So Dougie, I know that's not amazing for you, because if you watch enough of my streams, I think I do it about every time. So let's not make that a highlight of the day. So I just wanted to show you guys in the stream, because I was sort of looking at this maybe 30 minutes before the stream, trying to figure out what I want to do. So going back to the helmet version, this is the post one, so I kind of have everything jammed up in here. So I brought the new version in here, which I've gone through, I've done my polishing, and you'll see, like, turning off my subtitles, I've got other parts and pieces that are sort of sitting on top. So the helmet's got a few components that, in my opinion, especially in this case for 3D print, the more objects I have to kind of work with and sort of kit bash together, the easier it's going to be for me to design, and also to figure out, you know, making sure everything's airtight when I want to go through and print, and connecting all the dots. Trying to sculpt all this in one and model all this in one is a little bit more difficult as well. So I kind of see any external component as it seems to be modeled physically, I would try and make it that way in ZBrush as much as I can. This is just the way that I like to model. I feel like I get more control that way. So like this sort of metal piece here, I've got just a separate subtool, which is sort of a blobby, sort of rounded up piece. That's a little bit more hard edge. So I could sculpt it, you know, I could go in even with, I need some more real estate here. Symmetry, you know, we could do like H polish brush, maybe turn on the lazy radius. Just turn off those images real quick. I can go in and just do a little polish, hit the one key to kind of repeat, but it's kind of hard to do a perfect sort of polish like that, right? And even going like this, like too heavy, might be a little too strong. So something like that, it's going to take more precision. So I'll probably topo that one out for sure. And I've kind of looked at just blocking out these little pieces. Like this is just a little messy piece of geo. All I kind of care about is the silhouette of that shape. And I could do the polish by features trick to smooth that out. Right? We could maybe take a look at some of those features here if we were to just kind of go in, mask that thing out, even just really quick. Control W, and then run that polish by features with that open circle. Right, it's going to go through and tidy that piece up quite a bit. The problem with that is it rounds out corners, which in this case I want that to be sharp. So that's probably not a good solution for something like that, which for me, the next best option is either sculpt better or probably get into some topology with Zmodeler. And then looking at some of these final components too, I want to take a look at the side of his head. Like this sort of panel here, I've got a nice clean line that goes around sort of to the back, and then that actually turns into something like this, where I got some really complex shapes, where I got lines shooting up here, lines coming and growing down there. So I got to figure out how to get that working. But in this case, what I'm thinking is, let's just go through what I probably will do here is, you'll see I'll go through this process, is starting to get a clean piece of topo. So I got just the sort of side part here, and I've got this sort of raised bevel extruded piece that sort of sits over, and I've got a cut line. So if I can get a new piece here, I could probably sculpt that line later down the road, and then figure out how to go through and make it. So doing topo, this is getting into basically just setting up a scene to do it. I don't know if you guys are familiar with ZBrush topo. This requires using the Z-spheres. So what I like to do in these cases is break it off into its own thing. It gets a little, the toolbox can get pretty dense if you keep making subtools and things. I don't like to put Z-spheres in my scenes because Z-spheres can get mistaken for other things. A lot of people tend to forget if you were to insert a Z-sphere into the scene, you press the A key, it turns it into an adaptive skin. People tend to forget that that's a Z-sphere. You know, it can be problematic, and I see work getting lost in those situations. So just breaking it off into its own tool, and then let's go in here and just insert a Z-sphere, turning on symmetry. Symmetry is important actually if you bring in a Z-sphere. If you want this thing to be, you know, aligned and perfectly symmetrical, symmetry is off by default. So if you were to use move, you move it in any way, shape, or form, you lose that axis. But as soon as you put it on, move can only, basically it's holding both sides, it can only go up and down. So kind of going in and just, let's do no perspective. So it's a good rule of thumb to align it perfectly inside the mesh itself. And then let's go topo, edit. And I don't need much real estate for now, so let's go set up an image. Yeah, so I'm kind of looking at this little sort of beveled raised piece. So to get that nice clean line there, that sort of beveled edge, and it's raised up from the base down here, topo is going to be very much easier for me to make this work. So I'm just going to go start building here. It gets a little hairy with, so you're getting into longer polygons. I was trying to keep it, it's a bad habit of mine with topo is trying not to get too dense, just to cover the big steps first and foremost. Maybe I'll connect this in here. Cover the big steps, and then go back and fill in the gaps when you need to. Like this is kind of, I like to just get the flow, the direction that I need to. Like I know for certain I'm going to need probably another edge in the middle, so I can kind of turn this guy around. Oh, Dougie was asking about Snapshot. So far I haven't, but that's a good idea. Actually, Snapshot would be a good one for the front mouthpiece. I bet I can make that work just to generate that piece. Yeah, that would be a cool trick. So far, this has been kind of bare minimum ZBrush. I've just been doing a lot of like Zmodeler, well not bare minimum, but Zmodeler, live Booleans for the gun. But the body and the helmet has just been like sculpting, a lot of sculpting for this, which is probably why I'm not very happy with the surfaces, because they're a little messy at this point. And that's just my lack of sculpting skills. It's like the last maybe 3 or 4 years I used to be only organic, like I'd only sculpt stuff, which means I ended up doing a lot of creatures and a lot of, sort of characters, drapery, that kind of stuff. But the last 3-4 years, maybe a little bit more than that now, I've been spending, since Zmodeler came out, I found modeling and sort of hard surface to be so much more fun and enjoyable, which didn't really used to be the case for me, going back to other tools for block modeling. Yeah, William's got some suggestions in there for a tablet device. Oh, I haven't used that one, the Huion. AE, hopefully I'm saying that right, is using a base mesh acceptable in industry? Just start doing that from a base mesh for referencing the size of the head and the body. Using a base mesh actually is very acceptable in the industry. It really comes down to, in industry sense, the majority of people, it's like time is of the essence. Time is kind of your enemy, right? You have very strict deadlines. You have only so much time. If you have the ability to cut a corner and shorten it by not creating that thing from scratch, and you have a library, our now a member of our developer team, Joseph Drust, worked for Ubisoft, and they have a lot of like very similar games, shooters basically. You got Ghost Recon and Division and blah blah blah. They have a lot of characters that are very similar. So having a library of parts and pieces makes it a little bit easier to kind of pick and pull from, just to kind of save yourself the time, because it gets a little. It could be exhausting if you got to do a character in 2 weeks and you got to start the thing from scratch. It would just be a nightmare for you, and making your deadlines would be tough. But if you have something that you can kind of kick off from and save yourself a day or two of time, that makes a big difference. And then if in respects to design, however, those are more utility type positions. So if you're just a character modeler for a company that does a lot of the same sort of style of work, I've seen people who do have sort of library of assets, but in design, if you're, say, a concept artist, a lot of times you need to come up with an idea that's original. So it is something that you do design from scratch. But even concept artists I see will use base meshes all the time, but they just get really good at changing that base mesh from one thing into something completely different. Like a lot of people, I see tons of pro ZBrush artists out there that there is a sort of, I can't speak to this too much, but from what I see, some people have opinions on integrity, which I respect completely. But sometimes you got to get the thing done. The Nixie male average body, I see a lot of people using that as a starter. We have a lot of these base meshes in ZBrush that, as long as you take that thing, you make it something completely different. That is a skill in itself. So I'd say that there's pros and cons in those areas, and that's, I'm sure, is up for debate. Other people might disagree, but I myself, I spend a lot of time. I have the freedom to create in my own sort of pace, and sometimes. But working in the industry, obviously, it gets a little bit crazier when you've got deadlines and those things. So there's so many different ways that people work. Dougie said, Pixel Peeps are working on a smart retapo, which is going to allow the user to draw out their own geo in typical retapo Z-sphere fashion, but then we'll be able to press the magic button to fill in to generate the rest. Dougie's starting rumors over here. And Paul told you to ask me, told you to ask me. Oh, I'm sure he did. I bet he dropped that bomb on me. I can neither confirm nor deny that is a feature that we are working on. It's a nice idea, though. I do like the idea. Topology is one of those, sort of bread and butter tools. If you, if you work in the industry, it's like we have ZRemesher, which is actually really, really amazing. And every time we come out with a new version, even when I run a few courses in different places, and I find that I experiment with just different ZRemesh settings and using polygroups. Using polygroups as ZRemesher, like sometimes I'll get perfect edge flow in the areas exactly where I want it, and it really is just a matter of finding the right sort of recipe for the mesh. But no recipe is the same for each object and each piece. There's an evaluation process for all of that. So, this is where the auto topology, it has its practical uses, and it's great for, especially for ZBrush, just to remesh something and get something clean. It's amazing. But if you wanted to do something like this, you can't say for certain that it's going to always work. So topo tools are, of course, still in the game, and people still use them. I still use them myself, and it seems like sometimes it feels a little rudimentary, but it really gets the job done, and it's precise. It's about as precise as you need it to be in a situation like this. But it's the time, I think, that we all would like to cut down on, right? Because for me, I love to just go in and just sculpt something organically and not have to just know that, like, if it's messed up because I didn't, I'm not good enough, right? Or I'm not doing it right. But it's not a technical limitation or anything like that. It's just, I need to get more precise with the way I sculpt. And I see other people sculpting stuff by hand that, like, blows me away. That I am years away from, probably maybe never will reach it. But it's you know, that in itself is a skill to me. But then getting into the technical tools like this for me makes anything possible. I can understand this and, you know, navigate my way around it to sort of get my stuff up there to just look a little bit better and more clean. Pre-drag, yeah, it truly is. Our team over here has been doing a lot with ZBrush over the years, and it has been very fun to watch it grow and be a part of that. Honestly, it's exciting every time we can come out with a new version. You know, it had been a little while since ZBrush 3, but in between, you know, the versions, but it's still a growing tool, and it can only get better from here. And definitely when it comes to ZBrush on the development side, those of you out there that do have, the more examples that we get, issues or results, things like that, the troubleshooting and support, it does make a big difference actually, sharing that stuff with the community. If you guys run into things, we actually value that very much, especially for a tool like ZBrush, where getting assets and things that, you know, may need to be looked at or could help us to evaluate something, it definitely makes a big difference. So drop those in support if you ever get them. So I'm looking at this sort of back piece, so I kind of float this over and around. I want to be able to have this piece as a separate piece. I might do another piece for this guy and this guy, so having two shells, one sort of sitting further out. But this is kind of just going in the, I think what I'm going to do, you see this one's going straight down. I'm always thinking about like edge flow. If you maybe noticed, I did end up redirecting this line to shoot up here. So that way if I put an edge loop, it's going to travel all the way down the front to give me a nice sort of clean, sort of smooth edged line. And maybe one thing I'll do is, I'm just going to butt this up. Let's finish this first before I get too ahead of myself. So complete the thing. This is where I always get caught up, as I want to start finessing and moving stuff around, and end up spending an extra 40 minutes. Just, you know, you kind of get into that mind-numbing state with topology. It can be really fun. It's better for me when I have music. That's for sure. Yeah, like this one's going straight down. I want that to maybe round out just a little bit. So I might delete this guy, and let's take this and redirect here. See if I can sacrifice a try in there, or I could bump it up. That is a very large polygon. Okay, so just added another line in there. So we got to try this. I'm not going to do much sculpting on, so it's something to consider. Is like, you know, the 5-point stars in a sculpting sense. When you get points conversion like this, when that subdivides, that can be problematic to sculpt on. So you want to quad that out or kind of redirect that in a better way. But ultimately, in this case, I just want to have clean edge flow, do a nice extrusion, smooth surface, call it a day. But I did something a little different. Instead of you guys watching me troubleshoot this, let's just take a look at that. So once I'm done just kind of going in, turning density to 1, no Dynamesh, solo this guy out. Just press the A key for preview, so we get that piece of geo. And then I made that a skin. So going back, let's just take a look at this piece here. And I'm just gonna take this guy, geo. If I tap out, delete hidden. So I came up with, the flow was a little bit, I did end up cutting enough straight down so that I went straight across there. And I did get a little star. Alright, so I get just a simple little piece. Strap on his hockey skates. So something you'll notice, this is a little bit more dense. So it's a denser piece, which, you know, you could probably get something like this with a ZBrush, honestly. But instead of going back and forth, I just get a piece. And what I like to do is, like that topo that we have over here, things are a little bit more sort of dispersed. So going in, or not quite evenly dispersed rather. So making this a skin, let's go make skin. So you get a piece like this. Now, sometimes I want to just go through and evenly sort of smooth that stuff out. And even using this polish by features of maybe like a 1, you'll see as you start to go, things start to level out. So it's sort of a form of relax. So it kind of goes through and smooths that out. Now, when the mesh is super low, it really kind of shrinks the overall surface, which I don't want too much of. But a little trick is I just maybe add a couple subdivisions, so I just get a little denser piece, and I can go through and kind of, maybe just turn this off, kind of go through and polish it up. And subdivisions just give it more res, so you get maybe a little bit less shrinkage, but I was able to kind of just soften and smooth that thing up. And I can make slight adjustments to it later as I need to. So let's go back to this. So I get a piece. This was, I actually built a little bit more dense, so when I get the final edges, I've got smaller polygon faces. And it's basically that polish kind of does shrink it a little bit. So I ended up shrinking it inside, which for me is fine. What I get out of this is, now that it's inside, I go to Zmodeler, let's just do a extrude all polygons. Just bring that out of the surface. So now I've got that sort of raised edge right there. And that's just sort of that first step, and then it's also giving me that sort of extruded face back here, but maybe I think I want to go just a little bit further. Just looking at this edge here. Alright, that's looking pretty good. Now the next step would be, I want to get that sharp sort of edge, that sort of taper, which that is just going to be a nice little bevel. So it's kind of sitting inside. Eventually, for print, you know, it's jammed into the surface, so I can Boolean this thing together, and that should be shelled up pretty nicely. But then going to Zmodeler, let's just do a, so I don't want any close edges here on the borders just yet. So for this edge, let's do a bevel edge loop. There we go. So now I got a nice little beveled edge, which that image, it's actually, that sharp edge is sort of, there's no sort of stair step. So what I could do is, maybe just grab this guy. Push that in. And then now just, you know, using the camera and a big move brush, I can kind of just go in. So this is one thing I like about low topo too. So I can make just slight adjustments with a big move brush. And it's not too destructive. What's going on there? So I just did a quick mirror and weld there, which I have a couple hotkeys. Control-Shift-W is my mirror and weld. I just wanted to seal up that edge, which probably was a symmetry thing. And then that earpiece is actually, if you take a look, I do have this rounded edge, which if I smooth it out, it sort of tapers in there. But something like this, I can even just cross that into that earpiece surface. So that way when I smooth it, it'll look like it's sort of transitioning into that same piece. Alright, and then with the Zmodeler extrusion, something I also do a lot is I get into creasing. So I'm using dynamic to kind of smooth my stuff out. So I'm going to do crease polygroups. So crease those edges so I get a nice clean smooth edge there. And I'll end up doing a combination, like if that's a sharp edge at the bottom, the creases give me a pretty solid sort of crisp edge there, but maybe I'll go on with Zmodeler and just do just a single edge to kind of hold that one a little bit more. Let's try this. Yeah, that's looking pretty good. And then what else? Probably the same thing's going to work for that sort of top crown piece, because those are sort of raised on top of this. So I might need to get one more topo piece in here. Sorry, the white background. Let me change that for you. Let me know if that's better. Skin can go. I don't need that polygrips helmet anymore. So I'm bringing both of these objects in here for reference, and let's just do another. This one should be pretty easy. Maybe just cover the large steps here real quick. It's got those like sort of extruded slits. I'll probably want to put those in somewhere around here. And then I want that to kind of wrap, so let's do an edge down the middle. Might be a little better just to kind of make this a little bit more dense down the center. Let's give that a shot. So no density, no Dynamesh res. Let's make that a skin. Go back to my tool. Zleo, yeah, my pleasure. Sorry, the white looks good for me, but I didn't consider the stream. So then if okay, so I got this piece, which I might do some modifications too, but just go with Zmodeler. I just want to put in a single edge loop, so doing insert multiple set specific to one, I can put one perfectly down the center of an edge loop, as opposed to doing the insert single, which I have to manually sort of drag. I like to do that just to kind of go through and up-res that a little bit. And this is one of those things where that polish by features rounding out might help a little bit. Oh yeah, JakeBot, the old center edge loop trick. That one is yeah, it is very handy though, right? You spend so much time like trying to go through and just manually put stuff in. Once you get stuff even enough, if you divide it, then you're getting another set of edge loops, which you could easily go and delete the lower, and that gives you even divisions. But and you got to block that thing out. Just having that thing on multiple, specific, you can just go boom, boom, boom. Do it the old manual way. And then for this guy, I maybe just want to polish out a little bit. Yeah, we'll see how that goes. Let's go extrude all polys. Whoa, that's too much. So this is going to take a little bit more finessing. So like if I go through and I add a subdivision, that's going to smooth it out. All right, so I'm just looking at this image is probably not the best one to look at here. I should take a look at maybe this one. There is sort of a beveled sort of crown at the base of it. Well, let's see. In this case though, what I don't like to do is if I'm going to go through and change anything with this and I need to up-res it or anything like that, subdivisions is going to smooth it out, which means I got to add edge loops at the borders and crease it and all that kind of stuff, which isn't really necessary. I could actually just go back to this and I might just do a subdivision here at a lower state. But even before I do that, I do want to sort of establish the sort of lines here, which may be like these guys. We could sort of, so here I want to maybe angle those so I can do that sort of the shape here so I can get an extrusion. So what I could do is maybe grab, let's hope that that's right. So with Gizmo, I'm just masking it off and then I'm alt clicking on that vertex point. So it should give me a pretty good line on that edge loop there and that surface normal. And then I can hold alt and maybe just angle this. And then we can kind of go in, turn on local symmetry. Start to sort of flex that guy out. I mean, I could do this a bunch of different ways, but so I'm just using scale, moving it towards the center, whoops, which is just flattening it to that angle of axis. And then we can maybe go in and let's just insert a symbol here. And then try alt click here, maybe angle this one. That's a little too much. I might just kind of go in and just these guys. The cute jewelry. Oh, okay. So using Rhino for jewelry. Well, I'm glad that this is giving you some different views on making topology in these shapes. These things come in handy a ton when it comes to just making custom shapes and things. It's one of my favorite ways to model. It does take a little bit more to kind of get into this, but once you get the hang of just building the topology and then using Zmodeler is probably one of my favorite things. So I'm going to try this, extrude all polys. Now let's go in here and I'm going to do polygroup a single. Let's maybe just grab that strip, make that a polygroup. So now we could do extrude polygroup all and just bring that out. But first I should do extrude all polys, kind of bring this up. Now let's do a polygroup on this. And then we could do, so that's just separating this surface by itself. So I could do extrude polygroup all and just bring this out. Now I got that sort of shape in there. Ooh, T-splines. Yeah, I mean T-splines you can do a whole lot with T-splines for sure. There's so many different ways you can model. Honestly, I like to play around with stuff like this just because it's fun. You know, I get bored doing the same thing too often, but you work with what you got. You know, if I'm assuming you probably watch our other streamer Thomas Whittlesbach, who's a really good jeweler inside of ZBrush. He does all kinds of crazy tricks and things that you might find interesting. he's definitely he's a sculptor, but I know he gets into a lot of technical things too, especially with just scale, and setting all that stuff up for just clean builds. He's really, really good. Alright, so that's pretty good. Only thing is, I'm just going to kind of push this in a little bit. Only thing is this outer shape here that I want to just kind of get this down. So now I put some edge lips in there, so when I smooth it with dynamic, this thing's going to be, it's going to hold that shape there. But I want some more edge lips now, just so I can go through and kind of move this stuff into place. Otherwise I'm just pulling out stretchy geo, which works pretty well, but just to get into like the nitty gritty of these things, it's a little better sometimes just to have more edge loops. So I could now probably divide a few times. And now just using that move brush just gives me more vertex points to kind of go through and push and pull around. Louis Tucci.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Ladies
Are
and
you
gentlemen.
streaming right now?
Yeah, I'm just making stuff,
Are you streaming live?
Streaming live.
Hello again, people at home, live from the
Live.
mothership
Hollywood.
of invention. I'll see you there.
I'll see you at the summit.
You got it.
Alright. Well, it's looking alright. I don't know if I like that transition in the corner, but I'll leave that in there for now. It looks pretty good from a distance. That reads pretty well. Okay, so Cute Jeweler, you do watch Thomas. That's awesome. Yeah, he is so fun. Sheep Nerfer, which reference tool? I'm actually using Spotlight inside of ZBrush, which I just like to do because it's built into ZBrush. Basically, just going into texture, import an image. If you view Spotlight, you know. But once you import an image, select it. Let's maybe grab a new one. So I got a couple other references of this gun. So you select it, you get this thing in here, and once you have that image selected, there's this add to spotlight, which brings it into the spotlight sort of window. So this has got its own little controls. You can move images around, scale them. So once you have you do that for all the images, you've got everything in here. Shift Z turns everything off, Shift Z turns it back on, and then the Z key gives you the wheel control to select images and kind of play this around. But the benefit is, if you just press that Z key to turn the wheel off, the images stay on screen, but then you can go through and model and do whatever you want. So once you arrange images, actually I'll always keep I have my stream spotlight. Wherever you put place the images and you go in and you save that spotlight, it leaves them exactly where they were. So I can kind of pre-arrange and set up my own sort of templates and just load those guys when I need them. Oh, nice, Jake Bot, first time at the summit. Well, we're going to be glad to have you. Yeah, it's coming up so fast. Every year's, I think we're going on 6 now, 5, 6. Can't even keep track. But the year goes by so quick. It's going to be a really good time. I'll probably spend the majority of my time at the summit, at least the last couple of years, podcasting. If any of you guys check out our ZBrush podcast, we're still doing that. We're going to have tons of, it's kind of a media junket. All day I'm just sitting with people, chatting their ears off, going back and forth. I think I kind of like this a little bit further in that surface. No, that's going to get too messy. Do that later. Okay, so I got my top up pieces. Now, what do I want to do? Something I do kind of want to figure out here while I'm in this zone is getting these sort of lines working, just the basic sort of extrusions happening in there. which might just be, they sort of have like they're fanning out and they're getting bigger. So surface noise would be something that I could go to, but surface noise isn't going to give me enough control over those edges. This is one of those things that even a topo, just one more topo job might give me a base piece to work with Zmodeler. So let's go. I'm actually going to go back to this topo tool. I'm going to delete that topology so I can kind of use this to sort of build from. And actually, let's turn off edit topo, and I'm going to turn off that piece there. So I don't want that to get in the way. I want to be able to build this like roughly around the border there. So let's go edit topo. Just get the middle cranked out. So this is, I think for this to work, what I'm thinking is, if I can draw enough at evenly distributed edge loop sort of lines to kind of go in that direction, that it's flowing, I should be able to just insert enough edge loops in the middle of these guys to kind of get that working. So maybe like outsides will be a little bit more angled. This one's straight up and down. Yeah, so maybe like one step, two step in the middle. So I'll put this one in the middle. What'll happen is if I go in, once I get this piece with insert edge loop, it's going to do an even average between the sort of angle of this line and this one, just drawing it in. So if I get the hard transitions maybe happening with couple steps, I won't have to do too much here. Oh, whoops. No, gizmo. Delete. I just selected the wrong subtool. Whoops. I alt-clicked it. That can happen from time to time. Okay. Oh yeah, you guys are talking about reference over there. Quadro, I definitely use that. Pure Ref is awesome. Yeah. So Shonique, it looks like you're kind of using the smorgasbord of references. I love it. Jake Bott, you're asking, do I record the whole season of the ZBrush podcast at the summit? Well, no, actually, we've been making some changes with the podcast. We haven't been doing, if you've been keeping up with it, we haven't been doing as much. Normally, we shoot those at YouTube space here in LA. The ones that we don't do at the summit, we get a lot done obviously at the summit because there's just so many guests and so many people. So we try and take advantage of that. So, it's usually a good 10, 15 episodes, somewhere in there, ballparking it. But we do throughout the year, and when we were really in a good groove, we were shooting at YouTube space, which I hope that we will be able to continue doing that in the future. But just trying to gauge the level of interest of you guys, and if people actually like the podcast, I think that's feedback that would be really helpful for us to see, the value. I love to do the podcast. It's one of my favorite things, it's a very fun experience to be able to sit down with artists and just kind of figure out what's going on out in the industries and hear what they have to say. It's so much fun. Alright, so let's make that guy real quick. Back helmet topo. Oh man, I appreciate that, Jake. That truly means a lot. Yeah, I'm truly honored. It's honestly, like, I try and treat it as an inspirational thing for you guys more than anything. I try my best to not interject too much, but ask questions that people out there care about and get into as much as possible. So it really means a lot. A sheet nerfer, you're saying importing high-res images into Spotlight ZBrush bogged down the program at all. Actually, we've solved that issue. There was an issue with ZBrush in the past where certain like very high-res images, like 4K, because it's pixel-based, you're scaling it up and down. As far as I know, that hasn't been an issue, and I myself bring in all kinds of different sizes and issues, and I never run into this problem. So this is way back in, I think, ZBrush 4 or 8. There was some reports of that having an issue, but now it seems to be working very great. So if you do use it, though, please let us know if you do find that that's happening. All right, let's try this. We're going to go multiple. This is where I'm going to use the multiple specific, and let's do, so if I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that looks pretty good. Yeah, so I'm just going into insert multiple, doing specific. I'm going to do 5, 7. So this does give us creases, which I'll reset this here in a second. But I'm just clicking, and then I'm going to click in the next group of edge loops and do the same. So kind of setting that up, I think, has kind of got these guys fanning out. And then I want to make this one a very easy operation. So let's go crease, uncrease all. And the polygroups are not alternating correctly, so I'm going to do Control W just to kind of give it its own group. And then let's just do maybe a tiny bit. No, I don't want to polish that. Let's see how this plays out. So let's go. I'm going to do edge loop and do polygroup, polyloop, and I'll just click, tab Alt to get its own group. Every other one I can cycle through. Oh, actually, I need to do this without symmetry, so I don't get that. Or I could just change up my edge loop steps, but I'll just do no symmetry and just go through and assign these groups. There we go. Now let's go extrude, polygroup, or rather, let's try extrude. I should probably have done that after this step. So first thing I'm going to do is get the extrusion going. And now let's do our polygroup, polyloop. So I want to make sure that's right. Looks pretty good. And now we can do, actually, so now I want to, I guess I could extrude polygroup all, and I could do it on the inside. Whoops. And just bring all those parts out there, which works pretty well. I guess that's kind of good because it gives it a, let's do a crease. Actually, crease is going to have to get set up a little bit better. But it does kind of round that thing over the top so it looks like it's transitioning over. But then, even if I were to just kind of go in here, just doing a slight little move adjustment. And if I don't want to do the manual stuff too much, I could even probably go back to this guy. And let's just do bring him out a little bit further, maybe extrude polygroup. So I could extrude this so it kind of encompasses that whole part there. Yeah, that's a little better. And then I don't want to have that step in there, so if I just go in and delete this edge loop, it's going to sort of transition that edge all the way back up there. Oh yeah, Jake, you're talking about Freehand Profit. Yeah, I'm very glad that we were able to introduce him. That was actually Michael, who does the social media here and deals with marketing as well. He found him, I believe, through Instagram, and it was so awesome to talk to somebody who's kind of out of our industry a little bit and found his way into ZBrush in a really organic way and using it in a way that just, is very unique and different than from what we're all kind of accustomed to and just the CG world alone, which is very refreshing and awesome to see. Gary's a very cool guy. I've actually been able to keep up with him. We kind of bounce back and forth with, he's kind of getting deeper into ZBrush. I send him some training videos. He wants to learn more features. We hope to have him around more often, but that's awesome. You probably liked him just as much as I did. It was very cool to sit down with that guy. If you guys, we're talking about just one of the ZBrush podcasts, if you guys don't know, which you can actually find if any of you guys are interested. Don't watch it. It's here in ZBrush Live in the podcast section, which I think Gary's episode should be. Yeah, there it is, from the summit last year. We're going to be doing one of those like we did last year at the summit. Some of the presentations can't be streamed live, so we did that interview all live online, so that was a good hour and a half, so we'll be doing another one of those this year. So definitely look forward to that. It's almost there. Maybe it'll look a little bit better once I get that last little bit of topo. See how this guy works out. Let's do, actually, I'm going to do an insert. Oh, that's the wrong one. This is something I always tell people. If you get a chance, once you go through these skins, once I append them into a thing, I always end up leaving them and it gets messy. I'm just going to rename this. This is Topo 2. Keep that Z-sphere set up in there just in case. Probably just a scale factor issue. So now I'm just going to kind of hack this a little bit. Let's just do maybe alt drag to kind of get this thing lined up. Or I could just do it the old manual way and just kind of position this guy. As long as that thing's aligned well enough. Alright, I'm gonna go no creases, let's uncrease that. Maybe let this thing round out just a little bit more. So the creases are great, but then you start getting into, they're a little bit too crisp sometimes. I want that thing to round out just a little bit more with an edge loop as opposed to, of course we can go into crease levels, but that gets a little hairy and sort of back and forth. Alright, I'm not perfectly happy with this, but I'm just going to leave that alone for now. So I want to start to get into a few more things here. Yeah, there's, Jake, you were mentioning so many different creative ways to solve. There really is. It's like when you have the time and you can explore it, it's worth it just because you get so many different ideas. You can go, oh, okay, I could try this. If it doesn't work, it's okay. I can try something else. But, you know, having those things at your disposal I think is the most fun part about it. It makes it enjoyable. You know, it's not so much of a technical thing anymore where you get to actually sort of explore and just have a good time when you're modeling. Alright. So there's a couple things that are driving me nuts right now. Some of these little final sort of details, like these tubes, they're not quite there. Like I ended up just making a really, really messy tube as a rough out. And I think what I want to do is tidy up those pieces, which we could probably do some quick sort of Zmodeler tricks. I'm just going to go and maybe insert a cylinder. So another one that we could do a whole bunch of different ways is doing tubes. Like you could go in with the brush, even just doing the curve, or rather the curved tube snap. Right? You can go in and just draw a tube if you really wanted to do it that way. But for some of these sort of straight angle sort of arcs and sort of precision sort of turns, that to me is a little bit harder to do in a sort of modeling aspect of I want it to be really clean. So for this one, I like to do, if you guys watch a lot of streamers, if you are a regular ZBrush library, you'll probably see a lot of people do this. But basically be able to bridge one hole to a connected hole. We could start by just kind of getting this guy lined up. Just find myself a good angle here. So let's maybe butt this guy up as we get roughly into the corner there. Alright, so getting into like trying to get that sort of arc and turn. Let's see if I can make this work. So we grab a cylinder. And let's see what I want to do. There's a couple different ways we can do this. So what I want to do is create a hole. So what I tend to do is I keep this one in my hotkeys, but the group by normals I use so often. So for a piece like this, I'm going to get a polygroup here and a polygroup there. So doing group by normals, you get a little polygroup isolate, which then maybe going to Zmodeler, I can go with extrude. We can just leave it on polygroup all. And as I start extruding this, if I hold control, it's going to break this guy off. So now I can just break this off into its own shell. And one of the benefits, to make this really work, trying to keep it sort of in line with the gizmo here. Like I want to now move this thing into the transition at the bottom. So what I could do is grab this shell here, mask it off, and then I can inverse that and I can use that gizmo. I can alt click and that brings it here to this piece. So I keep the same orientation for this sort of gizmo, which can be handy at times. Now I can kind of start to go through and just align this piece. So it's still the same subtool, which is helpful. And I'll probably just, that's going let's just get the first one done. Alright, so now with this little chunk here, I'll do that group by normals one more time. Let's just do a delete polygroup all. Turn out double-sided. So we got 2 holes. So now if we go to the edge, bridge, 2 holes option, we can take advantage of our arcs. So maybe I'll try the basic arc. So I'll click the first hole, edge, and then click the second and hold. And now I can kind of go through, just bridge that connection. So I get a nice sort of clean transition. It doesn't always work. I mean, that seems to work pretty well for me the first time, but the type of arc that you have, you know, depending on which one, if you were to go in and choose like smaller round corners, you might get a sort of different transition or different arcing sort of curve. So this one is basically, you click one, click the second, and hold. If you drag to the right, this applies the elevation, so basically the arcing portion of it. And then when you drag up and down, this is going to start to insert those edge loops. So the more edges you have, the better it's going to hold the shape. So if I do no edge loops and I just go left and right, you see it gets a little crazy. But if I put it roughly in the right position and give it a couple more edges, I can start to round that thing out, make that a pretty nice transition. Wonka's an awesome menu. Yeah, I'm catching the tone there. it gets easier. Right? For me, it took a little bit of time to remember the stuff I like to use, but there's a lot you can get out of just a few of these features. This is pretty much, in terms of like edge actions, that's one of the biggest ones I end up using the most. Then I just do a lot of inserts and you know, extruding or Q-mesh, either one. Maybe we could just mirror and weld that guy. That thing is really weird. That's kind of shooting into this little shape here. So maybe one more time. Let's go Zmodeler, extrude polygroup, hit control, break this guy off. Or actually, maybe I'm misunderstanding what you mentioned there earlier, Wonka. Are you talking about my custom UI menu? Are you talking about the Zmodeler menu? If it is my custom UI, I appreciate that. It's a little crazy though. I feel like I didn't used to do this, honestly. I always kind of avoided it. I never wanted to get too caught up in my own stuff and, you know, get jumbled if I'm doing demos or presentations where the default stuff is. But it's so nice once you kind of have it. Like I map out my toolkit with all my stuff with the 2 key, and I'll just have quick access. Like I always want to have access to the delete hidden, split hidden, just like mesh cleanup stuff. But it took me a little bit of time to kind of allow myself to do it. There we go. That's looking pretty good. And then something I can do, like I don't have a lot of edge loops in this span, so I could easily just kind of go through and see I can move this whole chunk here. But if I had a bunch of edges, it's obviously going to change that shape. So for that piece, just giving me the ability to kind of go through and move that thing into place, fix my symmetry. It's looking a little bit cleaner. What else? There's some details I feel like now that I'm on a Zmodeler kick here. Like just getting into some of those nicer little extrusions. Something I might want to mess around with here while I'm focusing on these pieces is there's these kind of details, like these sort of riveted patterns and things. That's maybe something I could spend some time on right now. So I'm just going to take a look at these guys. These were just started off with a cylinder, I believe, kind of going through and just blocking stuff out. But maybe what I'll do now is kind of go in here and just do basic extrusions. I'll leave it on a single so I can just paint select my extruded faces here. And there's almost like it's like a framed extrusion. So I could take this and go just straight in, which is fine. But if I wanted to sort of give it that sort of inset, I do get a polygroup out of that. So we could go inset polygroup all and make sure it's on the region. And then I could go inset here and then now extrude polygroup and bring this back out. So get more of that sort of like framed in step there. And then maybe just insert a couple edges to kind of hold those shapes a little bit more. That looks pretty nice, if I do say so myself. Inset, leave that on a single. I don't like that. So let's see what I can do with this piece here. I'm going to move this in, just give myself a little bit more room to play around in that little space there. Kind of looking at these zigzaggy kind of rivets. If I'm going to get that piece in there and have that kind of texture, let's see, what would be a good way to do that? This is one of those things that I'm thinking, like, again, you could do a surface noise kind of trick in that sort of space, but for me, I mean, surface noise, then we got to go into subdivisions and have enough resolution, which can be really beneficial in a lot of situations. But in this, I like using ZBrush to get a three-dimensional piece for an object like that. So let's try this. Clone this helmet, just this little piece off, so I got something to work with. And I'm going to quick save. So zigzaggy would be a good way. Let's mess around with the deformer. So we could, let's just make a piece. I'm going to start maybe with grab myself a nice little cube. And I'm going to give it a little bit more resolution. A lot more vertical. No, we kind of stretch this guy out. Alright, now let's see. I want to just get maybe like a repeat pattern, so a sort of wavy, zigzaggy piece that I can maybe just do an array, or just to get that sort of flow. So what I should do is, let's try this. Let's go with the bend curve. We can maybe do just along the vertical space, we could do 3 steps. So this center one here, actually we probably want to do 5 steps. So we'll lock those guys in. And symmetry in Y space. Let's see if this works. Jake, I'm looking at your question here. I'm going to get to that in 2 seconds. Okay, so I got the bend. Let's accept it. And let's go. So we got some symmetry stuff going on here. I'm going to take this edge here, get rid of that, get rid of that. So I got a little bit of space there. Now, next thing I want to do is, let's maybe just go in and grab delete hidden and make sure double-sided is on, grab the mask lasso. Let's just mask off this edge. So I'm just trying to make a repeat part. That's my first goal here. And then now I'm just making sure that this is a sort of perfectly flat edge. And let's go delete edge loop, and then maybe slide this edge loop up so I can kind of start to fan those guys back out. So I want this to be perfectly mirrorable from top to bottom, so we could do the Y space as a positive. Let's go modify topo, mirrored welding Y space, yes. So that just mirrored weld that thing to the top. So now, this should allow me to do, technically speaking, if you were to take this and go brush, insert mesh new, turn on stroke, curve mode, and then we do, whoops, let's unify this guy. Let's try it one more time. Insert mesh new, stroke, curve. So if I draw this, alright, so it's drawing that along the curve. It doesn't necessarily have to be a curve feature, but if we go then into brush modifiers, as long as that thing is mirrored weld at the top and bottom, so when you turn on weld, it should be able to weld those guys together. So if that geometry is exactly the same there as it is there, it's going to weld. So I'm just checking to make sure that that welds, which that looks pretty good. But then next thing I want to do is probably just reduce this down to a little bit lower state too. Let's go delete edge loop. The only reason I added all those edges for that was to make the bend curve work a little bit more smoothly. The more vertex points you have, the better that bend curve, the deformers will work to kind of give you flex and sort of flow. And let's just clear these guys out. And then I'm going to do insert multiple, do that single trick, do one in the middle of all these. Oh crap, I forgot about these. Okay, cool. And actually, let's do this though. I want to close that. I'm going to try and make use of the array mesh option that allow me to step. So I'm going to close this off. Bridge edges. Okay. And now let's do that insert to cap those guys off nice and even. Cool. So now if I do Control Shift, or let's do a polygroup single. And just check this guy. Let's go array mesh. I'm going to repeat this maybe 15 times. Lock size position. Turn on transpose. And then turn off the gizmo. So I'm starting to get that sort of waviness. Oops. And if we make the mesh with extrude, there we go. So what happens here with the extrude option is when you're looking at this extrude, it's looking at either open edges, or in this case, if we have a shared polygroup there on that piece, and we leave this option on and make mesh, it's going to bridge those gaps. So we basically can make this sort of strip like this. And then from here, I could go in and let's just do an array of this whole piece now. And we're going to go maybe 15-ish. And we'll go over in X. Let's do a lot more than that. Just making a little grid piece. Now I got a piece of geo that if I smooth it out, it's low enough where it's not going to be too dense, but it's got a nice sort of like texture to it. And now what I probably want to do is I want to get this to sort of fit within this space here. And let's see, the best thing that I could do for that is probably make it an insert brush. We could try that. So I could take this guy from the front, go brush, insert mesh new. I'm going to go back to this dummy piece. And for that insert brush, I want it to just wrap in that surface pretty nice so it's sitting in there. Like I could just take this and just click and drag it. And that's actually not too bad. That works pretty well. But what I could do if you wanted to, if you're wrapping to like the contour of a surface, if we add some subdivisions and you really round that thing out, with the insert brush, you can go into the brush modifiers and we can turn on projection strength. And let's go no subdivisions. And I can actually have this thing sort of like wrap to the contour of a surface. But because it's a flat edge, I don't need to add subdivisions or smooth that thing out. So I could probably just go in here and just click and drag this guy. Whoops. Yeah, you'll see that projection gets a little crazy in that low topo state. I just need that to sort of sit and live in that space right there. And then let's do subtool, split, unmasked. That's what I want. Yeah, okay, so we got the split unmasked, and then maybe I'm going to go back to Gizmo. Let's use this guy to local symmetry. We could just even like stretch this out a little bit. So I'm just going to make it a little bit thicker just to ensure that it's going to sit in that surface. Could have done that when I made the brush, but hey, you know. So now I want this to basically sort of be framed. I'm going to cut out all this extra stuff so it's sort of expanding beyond that edge. Which what we could probably do here is do a little live Boolean trick maybe. So let's go. It's really just this sort of outer ring. So let's take this guy and let's do a Zmodeler. We could do extrude, poly loop. So I'm just going to expand that little chunk outside of it. Now what I'll probably do is just grab only this piece. This is just a dummy. I just cloned off the subtool, so I still have my old one. I'm just going to delete hidden. And then let's close this guy. Bridge edges. And I should have unique polygroups, so I could do the old crease by polygroups, and then dynamically smooth this guy. Oh, it's almost there. It's just not quite expanding beyond the reach. So let's extrude polyloop maybe here. Delete this edge loop and extrude those guys. So I don't see any of that surface basically. So I'm just going to cut that out. So then now we could just use this as a nice little live Boolean subtract and clip out all that extra stuff. So Boolean dynamic subdivisions, yes, I'm using those. Let's make it. Yeah, this is some trying to get into Boolean wizardry here, just trying to cheat the system a little bit. I guess it's not cheating if it's working. Yeah, so I just like clipped out all that extra stuff. Now I got this nice piece that should live in that space a lot better. If I go back to the original, it can just be dynamically smoothed. Go insert, dump that guy in there. It's just sitting on the edge a little bit. I probably could have framed that just a bit further on the inside, just kind of extruding it further. So we could go back here to this piece, and it's basically, let's go Zmodeler, delete that inner edge, and let's just extrude this poly loop further in. So that way it's just cutting into that shape a little bit more, and do that one more time. That one's not good. We want this guy. There we go. Just modified that a little bit. But that actually works out pretty well. Now I got a nice sort of clean surface, a piece of geo that I can use to work with, and I can, you know, when it comes to printing, I like to have this. That way I don't have to deal with, if I need to sort of, I could use this as a projection if I do want to project it onto another surface, but as long as that thing's touching all those surfaces and I shell all this together towards the end, that'll probably have a nice texture, at least something to work with that's, you know, no sort of erratics or anything that I don't have to deal with subdivisions. Pre-drag, thanks. Thanks, guys. Thankfully that worked out, you know. I was winging it on that one, but I wanted to get back to Jake. You had a question, something about UVs. Had UV to mesh and surface noise. I'm subdividing, see if it's stuck. Okay, so Jake Bot, if you're still there, I'm looking at your comment. You're saying you subdivided it, and every time you try to apply a stroke, you get a status of subdividing mesh UVs to number of polys. So you're getting a dialog box up here in the top left that's telling you that it's basically subdividing those UVs to whatever those numbers are every time you're trying to go through and assign a stroke, which, if I remember this correctly, it could be one of two things. You want to make sure that whatever the piece was, it probably would be one subtool, which means there's a setting. Make sure that you don't have free subdivisions on. That's something that can happen, that some people, I've seen people have issues with that, where that's locked and you have locked subdivisions and things like that. If it's not free subdivisions that's on, it's possible, let's see, if you have, make sure you don't have dynamic on as well. This, you'll see, like when dynamic is on, you'll get subdividing messages that it's telling you. If you have a mesh that has subdivisions, but then you also have dynamic turned on, that could be a contributing factor as well. And in dynamic, when that's closed and you have subdivisions, it's, you know, you might not even notice it. It could have been that as well. If it's not, and you have the example file, you can send that to us in support and we can take a look. I probably have to see the file to be sure, but off the top of my head, those are two things that I've seen that pop up with before. It wasn't hung on the actual divide step, it had finished that. Okay, yeah, if that's it, let me know. That would be, I'd actually be curious to know, because it sounds like it's not actually subdividing, but it's giving you that notification, which is probably why it could be dynamic. But yeah, if it's if you still have an issue with it, you can send it to us in support, give us the file, and we'll take a look at it for sure. All right, so 3:38. How much time do I have left? What do I want to go into? That thing is pretty much good. I'm not going to do any more topo with you guys. That's just going to get boring. But thinking about like some of these sort of parts and pieces in here, we could, that sort of like grid like texture for the eyes, we could do something like that. Kind of the same sort of effect that we have here. You know, even just like something I like to do when I'm taking advantage of that, the projection of an insert brush. Like I've got these eyes that have, they're actually kind of, they're not like perfectly jammed in, they're almost like wrapped organically into that surface. You know, if you kind of look at it, it's a little bit of little flex, which can be difficult to model and make that thing fit within that space. So what I tend to do is, like, if I were to just go in and try and make these eyes a little bit better. Like one thing, if I take a look at these guys, is they have a little curvature, right? And I was able to do that with the insert brush, but I noticed that when I modeled this thing, you've got these sort of wings that are shooting out in the bottom sort of right and left corner. I did them in the wrong, or I drew this thing out in the wrong way. So if I now go in here, and if I just take this piece and do, say, like a rotation, they're kind of oblong, right? They're matched to the surface itself, so it doesn't work. So the only thing that I can really do is maybe go back into that modeling phase and try and fix that, which, let's see if we can do that real quick. Kind of rebuild these eyes. And I think what I want to do is actually get some, while I'm building it, think about that sort of inner glow, these sort of cross-hatching lines. If I wanted to do, maybe like some lights in there and have a surface that's maybe a little like, do like some kind of like transparent print material that'll give me a little bit of reflection and things like that, and then put some lights in there, it would look pretty sweet. But I would need that piece to sort of reflect those edges, which means I'll probably just want to build it here. Do maybe just a quick bevel. Maybe do a polygroup. Okay, let's see, extrude. Insert an edge, do a slide. Nope, maybe slide edge to the partial. Let's just mask this off then. Now we should be able to do slide edge loop complete to kind of go through and just fan that thing down. So a little trick, if I just mask that whole thing off in inverse, now I can slide this piece down to kind of give that a little bit of a bevel-like shape. Oh, looks like I forgot. Let's see if this will work. So Q-mesh, we could do, extrude that guy out. Oh, it's almost there. Maybe just do a slide by point or by brush radius. Whoops, stop should be here. So now I just want to level this out. Something I like to do, if I want that line to be straight, I can just mask those verts, unmask, and then alt-click on that point, reset that gizmo, and just use the scale factor to kind of slide that thing out. And then just do a quick inset, extrude. Oops, not too far. Oh, whoa, that's not right. Polygroups are a little messy. So let's do auto group. Now I should be able to grab this guy. Oh no, what did I do? So polygroups get a little messy. If you aren't keeping tabs on those, I'll just do a group by normals. Now let's try this guy. And I might just go through and just grab these, extend the thickness, just the reach of that piece a little bit deeper, just in case I need it. So it's perfectly set in that face eventually. Okay, now the next step is trying to get that sort of crosshatch pattern. We could kind of do that same little trick if we wanted to. Maybe even just insert a plain 3D would be super easy to do something like this. poly mesh. I want these guys to be pretty small. So let's go inset all polygons. And this one I want to do each polygon. Or wait, first let's go extrude everything to give it some thickness, just to be safe. And then I'm going to do group by normal, so I get just, I'm going to do it just on these outer faces. Inset each polygon on these faces with polygroup all. And then let's do extrude polygroup. So we got a nice little sort of array of these sort of like fine little dots. Maybe this isn't dense enough. We'll see how this works. Jake, you're saying feature request, move pivot to unmasked center, a hotkeyable. Okay, that is a good one. I will be sure to put that in our tracker request. We appreciate that. Insert a. There we go. Bringing this guy in. Blends, you're asking, do I own a 3D printer? Personally, I do not have one at home. I'm pretty fortunate to have the printers around the office that we work with a lot of different companies. Obviously, they'll send us printers, so we get those here in the office all the time. So I get to save my money and use the Pixologic services to at least let us to, you know, become more familiar with those printers. But if I were to choose, I mean, I've printed on a lot of FDM printers and all different kinds at this point, but I'm a big fan of the foreign printer, especially for just surface quality in general. That's actually one that I'd like to pick up for myself. I'm thinking actually probably in the next year I'm going to do a form, just because I've been doing a lot more printing. It used to be just for work, you know, for experimenting, doing demos, those kinds of things, as well as teaching. Those things are definitely important to be able to go through, but for myself, the form is looking like the thing I want to get here pretty soon. So I'm just inserting, this is going to be for the insert brush phase. I'm inserting some edge loops here on the surface, so it's going to allow it to wrap a little bit better. That's going to be pretty helpful. And then for this guy, what I want to do, I want to go through and crease this edge loop. Just dumping in some creases on the sharper edges, so I keep that pretty crisp. And then this guy, I'm just going to take that, make sure that's a little bit denser as well. And probably just do the same trick so I can get that thing shelled out inside that space. So we can maybe just do a duplicate in this little scene here. So we can do extrude polygroup. Or maybe I'll just grab this guy, delete everything else, and let's go just do double-sided. Extrude that all the way out. Let's just make sure that this thing is fully cutting out that whole border there. And then for this, if you don't have creases, if I smooth it out, like if I do remove those creases I smooth, you're going to round out those edges. So if you want to, I mean, you could do this in a pretty low res state. Honestly, I don't even have to use slide booleans with dynamic. We could just line this thing out, do a little subtraction, and it's just going to leave faceted edges, which is probably okay. But it's up to you. I mean, if you wanted to make that a nice smooth transition, just going to add polygons. So when I smooth it, this means that this piece, it's better off when this has creases by polygroups at 15. So that means even at a low dynamic smooth at maybe 2 or 3, those edges are going to be pretty sharp and make that a nice clean transition if it's touching anything. And then Boolean that thing. But I might just cheat this out and go Boolean without any dynamics. We'll see how this kind of works out. Turn these guys off. Alright, that's looking pretty good. So I'm just modeling all this stuff in one fell swoop here with all these parts. And last but not least, if I do want to do, I might want to do like a sort of glass plate that follows with it. So I might just insert a cylinder in here. And then again for this wrap, I'm going to go with Zmodeler. Insert multiples and just give it some edge loops in the center of it. So that way, if I need to do any bending, sort of like if you want to see exactly what I'm doing here, if it's not making sense, if I were just to test it, we could do the bend arc. So the bend arc, you'll see when you have those edge loops, there's no geometry for it to hold that shape. So if I get any sort of arcing with that in any way, in this direction or this, when it's trying to fit to a curved surface, it's not going to hold. But if I go and add a bunch of edge loops in here, I should get, so we can do dense little piece here, dense piece there. Try it again with the bend arc. You see that's going to do a much better job of kind of giving it something to work with, so it'll flex a lot better. So then just making sure that that's sort of set up here. And I'll break these guys off into their own subtools eventually. And now let's just do a quick merge visible. So I got these guys into one subtool, and then polygroup, auto group, so each thing's got its own sort of polygroup shell. So now I got, if I just grab this guy, that glass plate's its own, and then that piece is its own. Now we can do brush, insert mesh new, and let's go brush, modifiers, turn up that projection strength. I'm just going to go through and turn off those eye parts. So this piece here doesn't have subdivisions, which should work fine. Form fit, which if it's warping too much, that base surface, maybe I'd want to find just a cleaner, like it's kind of got a little dip and sort of shape in there. But we could also do just maybe less projection strength. Get a little bit of curvature and put it in the ballpark, so it's kind of starting to flex with it. But then one thing I want to check here is the depth. So turning on depth and pushing this into that surface should actually and that just kind of gets me into position, and now I can do split unmasked, and now I might grab these guys, the auto group, we can go just break off those shells. So let's do split hidden, split hidden, and now we got these guys in their separate subtools, and I can do any further Z modeling with that, or moving these pieces around just to kind of get stuff into position. Yeah, the projection operation, I'm sorry, it definitely was a little choppy for me as well, and it probably looks a lot worse in the stream too. It's especially on a dense mesh, like this thing is almost a million, so it's taking a minute to kind of go through and process that thing, so it's getting choppy. Justin Fields, what's up? We want more podcast episodes. Come on back, man. We definitely, well, we're going to be doing some of the summit. I was telling these guys earlier. Let me just check the chat here with the rest of y'all. Make sure I didn't miss any questions. What brush are you using? What's that? What's that? What's that? What's that over there? Yeah, it looks like I got everything covered. Well, looks like I'm just about out of time, guys. It's about my time to cut it off. But do you guys have any questions? Anything else you guys want me to run through? I got maybe 3 minutes left to kind of shoot with you guys. Ryzen 9 can save you. That's definitely true. It's a powerful machine. Jake, thanks, man. I appreciate it. It's truly my pleasure. Hopefully, the plan is for all of us at Pixologic, we're setting a mandate to be doing this at least once a month. We've been doing our best to kind of jump on when we can, whenever possible. But of course, we're all kind of busy doing other things, and there's been times where I've been scheduled and I just can't do it. But once a month for sure, we're going to be doing this, and I'll be. This is kind of what I love to do. So if you guys like this kind of stream, this is my favorite thing, just to kind of go through and troubleshoot and answer questions. So I'm really glad you have enjoyed it, Jake, and everybody else. Eric, hard surface modeling, yes, to a certain degree. I've kind of been going through and getting into like building some more sort of hard surface like textures and shapes using some Zmodeler, doing some topology stuff. This one has kind of been about taking my sort of crappy lumpy sculpt and trying to clean it up and start to get some better shapes to start getting into, details and things that are going to make this thing look a bit more polished. So I'm kind of working on, I got my Star-Lord that's in position. I think next time when I stream, I'll be a little bit further along with this helmet, but I wanted to come back around to, I didn't really get to the wrap up of trying to get this, this is actually a Nerf gun reference, but starting to get Star-Lord's gun going. I got like the rough blackout shapes, but I need to start hammering in the details and that stuff. But yeah, there's some hard surface stuff in there for sure. Justin, you're buying beers? Is that what you're saying? In-N-Out Burger. All right, man. I gotta come by. I'll be by the studio soon enough. Yeah, guys, I'm definitely looking forward to the summit. If you guys are interested, if you haven't been, it's worth it. If you're in LA, even if you're willing to travel, it's definitely worthwhile. But don't miss it. And at the very least, we're going to be streaming everything, of course. So you get a chance to watch everything in presentations. We don't delete anything. There's only one presentation that I know of that will not be allowed to be streamed. So you'll have to be here at the summit. Otherwise, I look forward to seeing you guys if you're coming. Thanks everybody for tuning in. I'll be back on next month for sure. So thanks again, and I'll catch you guys next time.